Hello everybody, it's Ocelot, and today we're going to be focusing on 3 builds based on one of the new DLC weapons, the Black Steel Twinblade. For this first build, we're going to be using a bleed build, using the Seppuku Ash of War. This gives us plus 30 physical damage and 30 base bleed buildup, which scales with Arcane. It does take away your HP. It's 100 plus 15% of your max HP that's taken away. We're also going to be utilizing 2 new talismans. One of them is going to be the Lacerating Tree Talisman. This talisman is going to enhance our running attacks by 15%. This is going to stack with Letta's armor, which gives us plus 10% damage to our running attacks, but also to our rolling attacks and backstep attacks. As you can see here, we're using dragon incantations as well, because we're pairing it with a dragon communion seal. I like using Dragon Ice for the frostbite status debuff. For 30 seconds, this is going to make the enemy's damage negation go down by 20%, and on proc, it's going to take away 10% of the max HP. However, on bosses, I do believe that number is lowered to 7%. Another talisman that we're going to be using will be the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. This is going to increase all damage to our attacks when we're two-handing a weapon by 15%. Now this is going to work on our light attacks and heavy attacks. It will not work on Ashes of War. For the other 2 talisman slots, we're going to be using Millicent's Prosthesis, which gives us plus 5 dexterity. At max level, this weapon gets a B rating in dexterity in blood affinity. And this talisman also boosts successive attacks up to 11%. For the last talisman, we'll be using the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which when blood loss occurs for the next 20 seconds is going to enhance all damage by 20%. This stacks with the White Mask, which when blood loss occurs enhances all damage by 10% for the next 20 seconds. Now I will go over the buffing order after the boss fights, but I do want to point out that we're going to be using a new consumable from the DLC, Sacred Bloody Flesh. When you consume this item for the next 30 seconds, you will get plus 10 Arcane, and if my math is correct, you'll get plus 7% attack power. However, when blood loss occurs, you get an additional 18% damage, which stacks with the previous 7% damage. If you can continue to proc bleed in 30-second intervals or less, you can continue to cycle this buff. And to be clear, this is going to be the attack power buff. The plus 10 Arcane only lasts for 30 seconds, and if you wanted to plus 10 Arcane, you would have to consume another Sacred Bloody Flesh. For the rest of the armor, I have the Veteran's Greaves and Rakshasa's Gauntlets. I didn't use Rakshasa's Greaves because that would put me under the 51 poise threshold that I like to stay with. The gauntlets will give you plus 2% to all damage, but you will take slightly more damage as well. Now let's go over the buffing order. So you're going to put on Blessing's Boon. You're going to drink the Physic. Next you're going to put on Golden Bough. You're going to consume the Sacred Bloody Flesh. Last, you're going to use Seppuku, which is going to proc the consumable buff, White Mask, and the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. Now here's our stats and equipment. This is a level 150 character. We have 55 Vigor, 16 Mind, 20 Endurance, 18 Strength, 35 Arcane. We get 5 from Millicent's Prosthesis, 33 Faith. We have 45 Arcane. We get 55 when we consume the Sacred Bloody Flesh. For buffs, I have Golden Vow, Blessing's Boon, and I have Hal Shabriri for bosses that do not bleed, or if you don't want to use the Sacred Bloody Flesh. You can also use any dragon incantation. I prefer to use Rotten Breath and Dragon Ice. For equipment, we have the Black Steel Twinblade at plus 25 with Seppuku in Blood Affinity. Dragon Communion Seal at plus 10. We're getting 324 incant scaling. White Mask, Letta's Armor, Rakshasa's Gauntlets, Veteran Greaves for 54 poise. Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Millicent's Prosthesis, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Lacerating Tree Talisman, and in the Physic, we have the Thorny Crack tier and the Dexterity Crystal tier. Now for the next two builds, they're going to be jump attack builds, but they're not going to be bleed builds. This is going to be a variation of the bleed builds. Instead of using Seppuku like normal, for this first build, it's going to be a Faith build, Holy build, using Sacred Blade. This is going to be at least a New Game Plus build, as you can only get one Black Steel Twinblade per playthrough, unless you have a friend drop it for you in your base New Game. As you can see on the top right of your screen, I'm in New Game Plus 4 with this character, and we're going up against Placidusax. Now we're going to be using the same talismans that you would expect to see in any jump attack build. So we do have Millicent's Prosthesis, which again is giving us plus 5 to Dexterity. And for this build, since it's faith-based, that's going to be perfect as we save 5 points in our Dexterity stat for our level 150 build. We're also going to be using the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. Again, since this is a New Game Plus build, you can get one in one playthrough and the other in the other. This is going to boost our successive attack damage, and they stack with each other. In the other two talisman slots, we have the Claw Talisman. This is going to boost our jump attack damage by 15%. It's also going to stack with the armor that we're wearing. It's the new Gravebird's Black Quill armor from the DLC. This boosts our jump attack damage by 10%. It's the same as the Raptor's Black Feathers. However, it does give you slightly better defenses. For our last talisman slot, we're going to be using the Sacred Scorpion Charm. This is going to give us plus 12% damage to all of our holy damage, but we are going to take 10% increased damage from all sources. Another piece of equipment that we're going to be using is the Sword of Light. We're mainly using it for the unique skill Light for our body buff. For the next 60 seconds, when you use this unique skill, it's going to give us plus 20% to all of our holy damage. I like this over Shabriri for this build. Even though it is 5% less damage, it lasts 20 seconds longer, and you don't have to worry about the debuff you get from using Howl. For the rest of our armor, we have Rakshasa's Helm and Gauntlets. This gives us 2% to all damage per piece, but we do also receive slightly more damage. And the Beast Champion Gauntlets for exactly 51 poise. Now let's go over the stats and equipment. Again, this is a level 150 build. We have 60 Vigor, 16 Mind, 28 Endurance, 18 Strength, 10 Dexterity. We get 5 from Millicent's Prosthesis, 80 Faith, Base Intelligence, and Arcane. For buffs, we have Golden Vow. You can use Shabriri if you want, but we'll be using the unique skill Light for our body buff. With 80 Faith, you can use almost any incantation that's faith-based that you'd like. Let's go over the equipment. So we have 2 Black Steel Twinblades at plus 25 in Sacred Affinity with Sacred Blade. We have a plus 10 Erdtree Seal with 353 incant scaling, Beast Champion Greaves, Rakshasa Gauntlets, Gravebird's Black Quill Armor, Rakshasa Helm, gives us exactly 51 poise, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis, that gives us plus 5 Dexterity, Sacred Scorpion Charm, gives us plus 12% damage to all holy damage, Claw Talisman, and in the Physic, we have the Holy tier and the Thorny tier. Now for our last build, it's going to be yet another variation of the jump attack build. Now for this build, you can actually use the same exact stats and almost the same exact equipment as our last build. So the difference in this build is that instead of using the Sword of Light for the unique skill Light Body buff, we're going to be using Howl Shabriri. Now keep in mind again, this footage is from New Game Plus 4, and by using Howl Shabriri, your damage negation does go down by 30%. So if you don't want to deal with the damage negation debuff on yourself, you can use Flame Grant Restraint. It is going to last 10 seconds less, and it will be 5% less damage, but you don't have to worry about taking 30% more damage from all sources. All of the armor pieces are going to be the same. We're going to be using 3 out of 4 of the last talismans that we just went over. Instead of the Sacred Scorpion Charm, we're going to be using the Fire Scorpion Charm. Also, in the Physic, instead of using the Holy tier, we're going to be using the Flame Shrouding Crack tier. Now the nice thing about these last 2 builds is that you can switch between them easily on the fly. So when you get to bosses that are extremely holy resistant, switch to this build. When you get to bosses that are fire resistant, switch to the holy build. Now in this fight against Elden Beast, you're going to see me feature one of the new incantations that's quickly becoming one of my favorites, Pest Thread Spears. Again, this is New Game Plus 4, and with just a few casts of Pest Thread Spears, we're going to take off over half of Elden Beast's health bar. Since we are hitting that 80 faith final soft cap, you can basically use any faith-based incantation. Now let's talk about Flame Spear. This is also from the DLC and is a direct upgrade of Flaming Strike. When you use Flame Spear, for the next 40 seconds, it's going to add a flat 95 fire damage to your weapon, whereas Flaming Strike also lasts the same amount of time. It's a longer animation and gives you a 90 flat fire damage to your weapon. Flame Spear can also be fully charged. However, we're mainly using it for the buff on the weapons for the extra fire damage. It is nice though, whether you charge this skill or not, that you have a small fire projectile that fires out of the weapon. And again, it's a very quick animation, so while you're in the middle of a boss fight, you don't need a long opening to completely rebuff your weapons. Now after we finish off Elden Beast here, I'm going to go over the stats and equipment again, even though they're pretty much the same stats and only slightly varied equipment. And afterwards, if you want to stick with the video, I'm going to show the exact location of the Black Steel Twinblade. So again, it's a level 150 build. We have 60 Vigor, 16 Mind, 28 Endurance, 18 Strength, 10 Dexterity. We get 5 from Millicent's Prosthesis, 80 Faith. For buffs, we have Golden Vow, Howl Shabriri. We used Prophet as a starting class for both of the builds. We actually use a Prophet for all 3 of the builds that we just did with the Black Steel Twinblades. For equipment, we have 2 Black Steel Twinblades at plus 25 with Flame Spear in Flame Art Affinity. We have the Erdtree Seal at plus 10 with 353 Incant Scaling. The Beast Champion Greaves, Rakshasa's Gauntlets. These are going to enhance damage by 2% to all attacks. Gravebird's Black Quill Armor. Rakshasa Helm. That's going to be another 2% damage increase to all attacks. We're going to be hitting 51 poise with this armor set. This is going to decrease the chance that we're staggered out of any of our attacks. Now for the talismans, we have the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. We have Millicent's Prosthesis. That gives us plus 5 Dexterity. Fire Scorpion Charm for plus 12% fire damage. Claw Talisman. And in the Physic, we have the Flame Shrouding Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier. Next, I'm going to go over the exact location. So right when you enter the DLC, after touching Miquella's arm, you're going to want to go to this first site of Grace, and we're going to head directly north. We're going to need to get past Castle Ensis, So you could do the skip, which I'm about to show you, or you can go through the dungeon and fight the boss. But here's a general path that we'll be taking. And on this last mark that I'm going to make, this is the enemy that's going to drop the featured weapon of this video. Here, I'm going to slow it down. This spirit spring, when you first get to it, will be locked. You can find a pile of rocks, or, like me, you can use Moog's Shackle. That will clear the rocks and will open up the spirit spring, and it's going to take you into the Fort of Reprimand. So you can stop and pick up this grace. From here, we're going to continue on north. We're going to go into a straight line right directly to the weapon location. And here we are coming up to the enemy that drops the weapon. After defeating this enemy, you're going to get the featured weapon, the Black Steel Twinblade. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. If you have any build requests, you can leave it in the comments. You can also join the Discord. There's going to be a link in the description. See you on the next one.